You're listening to Happy Hour Hustle, a podcast featuring the musings and witty remarks of me, Kim Bodie. We can promise at least 2 terrible jokes, which I will laugh at, and at least 10 minutes of incredible thought leadership from some amazing and influential guests. So grab a glass of iced red wine and join us for one heck of a wild ride. Also, be prepared for a dog bark or 3. There will at least be 1. I should have had some wine. So we're here with Robert Johnson from RIESTER Public Affairs and PR Nation podcast. One of my favorite people since I met you, probably about a year ago.
About a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah. You are not in Michigan. You are in in a very interesting area right now. Why don't you share with us where exactly you are?
I'm 40 miles from the United States Capitol where the invasion is taking place. Right
Yes. Invasion is, yes. Yeah. I hear that some cops are taking selfies though. So that seems like a totally legit thing to do right now.
Those pictures can find their way on the news channel.
Right. So exactly. I'm actually finding them right now and putting them on a billboard.
PR. That's what they're doing.
Yeah,
public relations.
Exactly. They're going to need to hire us very soon.
They should. Yeah. I've been around Washington off and on since 1985, and this has not happened during those years. I mean, that's 36, 37 years worth of time. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. What are they saying? 1800s was the last time. War of 1812. Yeah. That's when they're saying there was a coup like this. So.
Well, we're recording here. It's starting to get dark, and I think that's the big concern is to have this crowd in those areas with no light. That's what they're worried about now.
Yeah. Well, for those of you who are living under a rock, what we're talking about right now is the fact that the electoral vote was being certified. And that was interrupted because of some protesters that have now stormed the Capitol. So, and they are currently roaming through the halls and are in the different chambers. And so it's gone into lockdown, and there are some suspicious packages that are being investigated. The National Guard has been dispatched. So it's certainly a situation that we have never seen before in the course of our lives. Not the course of our history, but the course of those of us who are alive today. So
those of us who can remember that far back.
Right. Exactly. So before and what's interesting is the title of this podcast is, let's talk about the shit show, which is what we like to term 2020, but maybe 2021 is just going to really beat it all. Who's to say?
Let's hope not.
Oh God, let's hope not. So anyway, we've obviously talked about the coup. We'll go back to that, but let's introduce you, because you, you've gotten around. So talk a little bit about where you've been and what you do.
Well, I'm a PR guy, and I've been at it since 1985. Before that, I was on the radio in high school because I kind of sounded the same as I do today. So
you do have the radio voice, that, right?
It was easy to get a job. Yeah, it was easy in high school to be a DJ on the local AM radio station. So essentially, I've been working in radio, TV, PR, politics, political communication campaigns since 1981. So that's 40 years. That's the short version.
That's a short version.
But I'm super cool though, Kim, though. Don't let the 40 years fool you. I started.
Obviously you're cool. I wouldn't have you on here if you weren't cool.
Okay.
I have a certain standard we have to meet.
All right. I appreciate the imprimatur.
Yeah, you're welcome. So obviously we call this Happy Hour Hustle. So the first thing that we need to ask you is, what is your drink of choice?
Well, it's not very manly.
I don't care. Tell me.
All right. I guess I'll tell you. I love it though. I like some Sprite with ice and some coconut rum. That's
really?
my deal. Yeah.
What does that remind you of? What's that flavor? Is it like being on the islands?
It's just sweet. I'm not a beer drinker. I don't really like to drink at all, honestly, but I do like my Sprite and my coconut rum, and not Captain Morgan, because what is that? They say that's like suntan lotion or something.
Yeah, it kind of even smells like it.
Yeah, I prefer something a little stronger. Yeah. You can get better coconut rum. Yeah. Just not Captain Morgan. Anything else works. It's hard to get at a bar, though. You can't get it, really.
Oh, yeah, because that's all they stock up on.
Yeah, just Captain Morgan.
Yeah.
So normally,
or they switch it out when you started with the more expensive one, and suddenly you're like, this is not right.
Normally, I'll pretend that I like a regular rum, but I don't really. I'm drinking it for the PR value of it.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
Haven't we all done that? I mean, I used to have to drink white wine, and I hate that because that's all I could ever find at networking events. So.
Oh, really? That's interesting. No red wine.
Well, there would be white wine and red wine. I love red wine, but I never liked wine really. I was like always, I mean, you come out of college and you're going into PR and you're like, suddenly you're supposed to be refined. And you're like, I'm usually drinking Captain and Cokes at a party. And now I'm suddenly, all I have is wine and wine. No. So
put down the Schlitz malt liquor, Kim. It's time to drink something more grown up.
I've got that box of wine and I'm just chugging it, at a frat party. So what else am I going to do?
You're bong in the car, okay?
Yeah, exactly. Well, no, I carry that with me. I'm not going to leave that in the car, obviously, All right, so we like to do some icebreakers where we ask you some random questions, because why wouldn't we? You have your choice between eating an entire batch of cookie dough or brownie batter. What do you choose?
Oh, I hate things that aren't cooked.
Really?
I do not eat anything that's not cooked. I will choose starvation. That's the third option.
All right. Well, I guess
no sushi.
I guess so.
I'm not into that either. It's
no, really?
Yeah,
but okay. So I cheat on sushi. I go with the veggie rolls, and I go with the crab. I don't eat anything raw either. So unless it's brownie batter, because I for sure would have chose that. But it's
gross.
fine.
I got a croissant the other night that feels like it wasn't cooked all the way through, and I just about tossed it. I was like, half of this is in my belly, and it's time to get out of my belly.
Yeah. That is kind of the worst though, because you're like the yeast and but
it's nasty. So no uncooked dough at all. I'm sorry.
Fine.
Hopefully that doesn't reveal something weird about me, but if so.
Well, I don't think so. I think that's actually fine. I think it's probably more normal, or should be more normal.
Well, it complies with all federal health guidelines for safety.
Fair.
Make sure it's cooked.
Yeah. Okay. So we didn't even really talk about PR Nation, because I want you to talk a little bit about PR Nation. You are one of the co-hosts. Let's talk about the other co-hosts. You have a couple other people that are on too. I always hear. I was just listening to your one on December 18th. Who was that author? Because I can't remember off the top of my head, but I was like, his accent. What is he, Australian?
He's British, I think.
British.
Yeah, from the UK.
Or whatever, same thing.
Yeah, I think he's from the UK, though.
Yeah.
He's an author who kind of tells it like it is. He sort of reminds me of you a little bit. Like,
oh my gosh.
He'd be the
when you said
he
tells it like
it
is, I was like, I'm going to like this guy. I'm going to have to get his book.
Yeah, he came right out and said, well, I lied to my boss all the time about all the folks that I was pitching. And the only time I ever pitched the media is when the supervisor walked by. And then after that, I just made up everything. I'm like, that reminds me of Kim. No, Kim doesn't make PR, things up.
Right? Don't you kind of just make up things? Yeah. No, I'm just kidding, people. I don't need anybody writing into the show.
You're not like that, but you are a little bit sassy. Or a lot.
Yeah. I mean, this is called the happy hour hustle. I mean, I've got to live up to that a little.
But my last trip before the pandemic started was to Grand Rapids, and I was hanging out with you and Adrian Wallace and your husband and her husband and some other folks. And I have to say that every time I was around you, Kim, I needed to go back to the hotel and rest a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and then also forget all the swear words I just taught you, probably.
Well, and I know Adrian reminded you at the time that I was a Republican, not the kind that we see today.
Yes.
And you're like, oh.
She told me I had to be nice, and I was like, I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen here.
I don't care.
But I do like you, and it is a good reminder you are not the Republican of the day that we see right now.
I'm very old school compared to what's going on here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
A dinosaur almost, it seems.
Oh, I've just been refreshing Twitter. That is actually a good lead into.
Did you want me to talk about PR Nation?
Oh shit! Yeah, I did. Yeah, go back to that. Sorry,
just real quick. It's a podcast about PR, and every 2 weeks on Friday, we put out a show that attempts to help PR professionals across the country, the 99% of PR people who aren't partying in New York all the time. We try to give them something that they can take away and use. And we have a lot of people who listen that are all over the place in terms of their experience. Although I'm especially proud of the student audience. Which is probably more than half of our listeners. They're either in college getting a PR degree or they've just gotten out of school. We have so many great relationships. We've helped some of them get jobs through the show. And we have tracked them, through LinkedIn and emails and such. We're bringing some on board here in the new season. So we'll have young correspondents feeding their perspectives in, doing their own interviews. It's exciting to get the show off the ground again, and it launches on January 22nd on Friday.
When you said that, that's one of the things I think that we kind of bonded over, because it's the student thing. And I blame Adrian for it, because I never got, even when we both went to Grand Valley State University here in, Michigan, I never got involved in anything. Probably because I was, carrying my bong everywhere to the parties, but
you were involved, but not.
Yeah, I was involved, but it was, I was relationship building on a different level. So
relating to the public. Sure.
Yeah, very much so. Community engagement 101.
Absolutely.
So that's how 834, 15 years ago really started out, is we wanted to, I felt like, you get your fundamentals in college, but like, it's not, it was listening to your podcast on December 18th I encourage people to, it's Hot Takes on PR Agency Life, which was so true. And your guest was talking about the fact that like, young PR professionals go in or they're first, they're grads, and they go in and they're all like starry eyed, and they're thinking Samantha Jones from Sex and the City, or like Olivia Pope from Scandal. And they had no idea that it can be so tedious and so like time consuming. And so I appreciate that you give them a real like look and take. And then I just actually sent your podcast around to my staff, and I was like, you guys really need to be listening to this, because there's some really great takeaways here. It's just some good, it's a great introduction, but also like it's for every level practitioner, not just like, student or first year practitioner.
Right. We talk about all kinds of things. Storytelling, everyone calls themselves a storyteller, but what is really involved there? And if you hear that and you have that in your LinkedIn profile, maybe you reconsider how you define
maybe take that out
that you say you have. It's for anybody who wants to get better. That's our goal. We're not really interested in personalities. We're not interested in having someone come on and talk about themselves.
Yep.
That stuff is being covered by some of the bigger PR podcasts, and it's just garbage. I can't use that. I don't have a lot of time to sit around and listen to that stuff. So we really focus more on news you can use. I was a broadcast journalist long before I got into PR. And so we apply those skills, and we keep the audience in mind at all times.
It's interesting because it's one of my favorite things about your podcast, because I have done a deep dive into different PR podcasts, and I was like, okay, what is it that I can, what can I learn from it's a lot of talking to personalities. And I was like, I like the idea of talking to authors like you did in your, the episode that I mentioned, but I don't want to sit around and hear, unless I have a takeaway. And I was writing things down from that podcast. I put it someplace, and to me, that's like that. I know there's value there, because I was actually laughing. I was actually like writing things down. I was actually engaged. And for a PR person too, that's a whole thing. Know your audience. Like, I'm going to tune out because I'm a PR person. I'm over here on Twitter. Then suddenly I'm on LinkedIn, or I'm in like my media database, or, whatever, or checking emails. So like for you to be able to really engage people that long is a testament to how good the podcast is.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. We work very hard at it, and we throw out a lot of ideas that people come to us with to make sure that they sort of meet that test, because it only takes one wrong move to ruin your relationship with the audience. But with the author, we weren't talking about him.
No.
We were talking about his ideas and how they applied and what people should know. And so there are lots of ways to do interviews, lots of different ways to tell stories. But if you know who your audience is and what they want out of it, then that will help focus that direction of the conversation. And hopefully you did it right when it's all said and done. Oh, we have
there's usually a dog that pops in. This one has been barking at my feet.
Does he have a microphone, or can he hear me?
Well, no, just thank God, no. So now that we've talked a little bit about the coup. We've talked about the fact that, your podcast and, your experience working around politicians a little bit. So the title of this podcast really is Shit Show, because it's my podcast and I can swear if I want to. I wanted to name some words that I feel are associated with like 2020. And I just want to get your take on it. I'm going to go through all of them at once, because really together, I feel like it's a real good picture of 2020. And then I kind of want to just talk a little bit through it. And then I want to have a conversation about brand activism and brands taking a stand and that kind of stuff, because I think, especially in this past year, and especially I think after what's happening today, to me, a company and a brand cannot remain quiet. All right, here's your shit show words of 2020: pandemic, Trump, election fraud, work from home, vaccine, activism in Georgia. Georgia's my favorite, mostly because that one bled a little bit into 2021, but hey, it was big at the end. So
interesting. Well, the title would lead you to believe that it's all negative, and I think I might amend your list, or at least propose an amendment to your list to take vaccine off the list, because that's a good thing, right?
Yep, that's true.
It hasn't been rolled out right everywhere, but if you consider what's happening and the scale of it and the learning while doing aspect, it's probably a victory on almost every front.
Agree.
No matter what.
Well, as quickly as it's been as well.
Yeah. Because just this sort of thing hasn't happened in generations. And so, how we do that and do it with no resources, that's a big challenge. The rest of it, I think that your title probably sums up 2020. Who's going to defend it?
Oh, gosh.
Sucked. It was just a sucky year.
Yeah.
I
will say good things come out of really shitty situations, like they do. Like our agency, has gotten some really cool accolades recently. We're growing. I've seen, like our client list is solid. Like, so there's a lot of good things. And I think a lot of people would say relationships, but obviously I don't think anybody would say like, wow, 2020 was my year. If they did, somebody should punch that person.
We all would have preferred something different. I had no idea. This pandemic was just getting started when I was up there hanging out with all of you guys in Grand Rapids.
That's right.
And it was the last business trip that I've taken. I've not gone anywhere else since then. So, at least I have fond memories of my last outing.
Yeah, this is fitting then that we're kicking off 2021 together, I feel like.
We are. And there are some things that have come out of it that are good. We've learned how to work more efficiently. We've learned that we don't need the overhead of an office necessarily to be a real and viable business. We've learned how to master technology. A year ago, if you said to someone, let's get on a Zoom call, most people would be like, I don't really know how to do that, dude. Can we just talk on the phone? Now everybody knows how to do it. Right? Yeah. Everyone. This is how even the TV people have figured out how to bring everyone into their newscasts live on Zoom or WebEx or whatever. I'll tell you, though, the biggest thing about it that is positive in my mind, and it came from a kid who's joining our PR Nation podcast as a correspondent. His name is Zane Land, and he lives out in California. And he's actually got a national position, I think, on the PRSSA board. So
that's amazing.
He's a rising star.
Yeah.
And, he lives in Chino, it's inland. It's not a beachy town. So it's just normal America, right? And he said to me, he goes, the best thing about this for me is now, even from here, I can attend any meeting anywhere in the world that I want. I get invited to speak in front of groups that I never would have been able to visit in person. He goes, the whole world has opened up to me this year. And I thought, wow, we should all have his perspective, because it's true. Now we can talk to anybody, anywhere we want. We don't think twice about it. We dial up folks across the world, and people who maybe don't have the resources to jet set all over the country or the globe, they now have the entire world available to them.
Yep.
And Zane's a student, and here he is now. He's playing on the world stage. It's awesome.
And would you have hired somebody on the opposite coast if it wasn't for, you think, like for 2020, or do you think you would even explore that?
Oh, I don't think so before the pandemic. No, I think now, though, if you can verify that the person's a good fit, and the references mean a lot more in that situation now, because you're going to have to, get people to tell you what it's like actually being around that individual, and if they can be trusted to work on their own. But I think it's definitely more likely now. I think the possibilities that we've not been able to see because we've been worried about our health and the health of our loved ones, our jobs, losing people that we care about to this crazy virus, fighting over masks and that sort of thing. I think all of that has taken us away from being able to really reflect on what good came of this. And I think that's the big one.
I would agree with you, because we actually have an open position right now, and I've interviewed people all over the U.S. because I'm like, it honestly doesn't matter. Like, no. I don't care where you live. I mean, if there's a time difference, that might be a little bit of adjustment, but even then, that's not going to essentially like keep you out of the running for that. So like,
not anymore.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So I agree. I do think there's definitely some good stuff that came out of 2020. It's just, we all know somebody who's been affected in a very negative way. And I think that's where this year will stand. And hopefully what we're seeing right now happening in the Capitol will not define 2021.
I hope not. There's a lot of 2021 left.
Yes.
So I hope that it is enough to overwhelm the baloney that's going on at the Capitol. Right now.
Gosh. Well, and I'm over here just, I've got Twitter up as we're chatting just to see, like what's going on now, what's happening. So
Trump finally told him to go home. He finally tweeted
did he?
They need to go home now.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that was really, was he like, so you guys probably should, like, was it really forceful like that?
The quote, I can't tell. CNN is up and they don't really like him. So I don't know what the entire tweet said, just for, fairness here. But the quote is, it's time to go home.
They're probably on their phones right now. They're probably transferring their AK-47s to their other arms so they can tweet.
I grew up in a house that had guns, and I know how to use them. But
same.
My dad was a retiree from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. He worked in the federal prison system, and then he got a second career at Walmart. And he ended up in the sporting goods section where they sold guns. And he was always turning people down. He would size them up. He was a little guy, and he would look at them and go, "You have no damn business buying a gun, and I'm not selling you one, so get out of here." And then his manager would get mad at him and tell him, "Well, Bob, you got to sell him the gun." He's like, "I'm not selling him the gun. You sell it to him." And the manager was such a sissy that he never would. So
was he employee of the month? Because I would have made him employee of the month.
He was running his own. Well, he should have been, but he did that for 20 years. And
wow,
he would never have sold an AK-47 to someone who claimed they needed it for hunting.
No, well, and that's the thing too. Like I grew up. I knew how to use guns. We had guns. Like you were responsible. I didn't use them on a regular basis. I had a bow. Like so I don't. Well, actually, here's a little known fact to you. Obviously, I'm in Michigan, and you know that there was a plot to kidnap our governor.
Yes.
So I have a cabin up north on 3.5 Mile. Well, just in case you were wondering, the Michigan militia, where they were plotting this, as a training ground on 3 Mile. So
yes. I was thinking
we were right next to each other.
Interesting, Kim. We
had a lot of potlucks.
Send your name to some official.
Yeah, to somebody. I'm probably getting flagged right now. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine. So
yeah, that's right.
I'm already on a watch list. It's okay.
What's left of a deer if you blast him with an assault rifle? I just want to know that.
Right.
Nothing.
Literally
nothing to eat. There's nothing left, so it's all ridiculous baloney.
Yeah.
And we never shot anything that we weren't going to eat. That was the rule. If you shot it, we were going to eat it, and that's it. And those were the rules, though. But today, society is so far gone from rules.
Agreed.
And worrying about other people. Everyone's in it for themselves, it seems. And
so true.
It's just horrible. We got to get back to the basics, I think.
We do. We really, really do. Like, yes. Yeah, I totally agree.
I'm Robert Johnson, and I endorse that.
And I disagree with the Republican.
Fun.
History has been made.
You did? Oh, my gosh. Delaney needs to send out a news release right now. She's listening.
All right. So talking a little bit about, obviously, public relations. That's like both of our background. This past year, I can say especially, like, when we had to, and I hate the word pivot, but sometimes it's the best word. When we had to get to a point where we had to kind of like move things. So like nobody was going to be running certain stories. So we needed to be specific to, like how are we tying things into like the state of the country? So I'd say like, we thought like it was going to be COVID, and then it was the election. And then we're, like the racism is, as it should been, was, became like we were talking about that nonstop. So how, as a company, and I found we were consulting with our clients and we were having conversations with our clients. It's just like today, because PR touches all aspects of all communications, and PR is tied into digital. And one of the first things we did when what was happening is we said, we've got to go out and we've got to look at social and see what we're pushing out for our clients right now. And we need to hit pause immediately, because there's anything that we're pushing out could absolutely be seen, depending on what it is. We know what's going on in the national stage. Now's not the time to post a call to action to purchase a product right now. We've had to instruct our clients on certain things and how to come out thoughtful, but also to take a stand on things. And that's one thing that I am very, very passionate about, where, we have certain things that we champion through 834, and we had to be specific to, we have no problem talking out, as you obviously know. But what do you think about, what would you tell other companies? I mean, you've worked in public affairs for a long time, and, is brand activism something that people just, you don't have a choice anymore? If you're quiet, you're going to get called out, or if you do say something, you're going to get called out. I mean, I found that people respond much more to us because we are, I shouldn't say more, but people, I think, respect our brand more because we don't mince words and they know exactly what it is that we stand for. And you see companies like Nike doing it, American Eagle did it. So what are your thoughts on that? And especially with 2020 being the year it is?
First of all, I have to say that I've done my hardest work, my darndest, to avoid politics the last 5 years since moving back to Washington. It's a weird place to say that, right? Because this is
that's where you live.
Politics lives and breathes and sometimes pukes on the floor. So there's that. And I guess that's important to know first, because my answer to the big question is going to be, it depends.
Yeah.
I don't think that anyone should just weigh in because.
Agree.
I think some people do that, and it really backfires on them. I also don't think weighing in is right for everyone.
Yeah.
And I don't think everyone needs to do it. It's interesting you would ask me this question, because I kind of talked about this at the PRSA meeting I spoke to in Grand Rapids as part of that visit. The chapter there was having a meeting, and for some reason they were they had lost their marbles and decided to invite me to come speak. So I did.
I know.
And I think membership dropped after that. But anyway,
I'm certain it did.
I probably did.
Yeah.
Or the bar tab got a lot bigger. So I think you ought to run it like a campaign. And by that, I mean like a political campaign. You need to really, and this gets back to what we started with, know your audience and know what they expect from you and whether you care what they think. Whether you need them to think something certain or special about you, and then how that's going to play out. Because there are groups that run around trying to bully any big company they can find into taking a position that may not be in line with that company's customers. But they use the media to club them over the head. They take advantage of their lack of preparedness for these sorts of attacks. And they end up getting a company to stumble into a room that it should have never gone into, where it gets completely stripped down and kicked out into the alley. So I talked about then, and I would say now, you need to do your homework when you're not in the spotlight so that you can be ready if you get there, and handle it the way you need to. So, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, unfortunately. For some people like Ben and Jerry's, their reputation now is they weigh in on everything. I don't know how effective that is, actually.
Well, and then they put it on their ice cream.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a lot of words on a very tiny pint.
Yeah, I know. It's funny stuff, and that's fine. Look, if you're Dick's Sporting Goods and you're looking at all the gun violence, to carry that theme further, and you say, you know what, we should not sell guns anymore, then that's great. Take that position. It didn't hurt them. They're fine. It drew some fire and some compliments at the same time, but they made a decision. They weren't necessarily being pushed into that, but they just did something that was responsible as far as a corporation goes. But I do think that, like everything else, whether it's a reporter coming trying to force you to make a policy decision that you shouldn't make, but you do because you want to avoid the media coverage, or a group that runs around the country looking for easy target. That's what you have to watch out for. And, honestly, the audience knows when it's not real, don't they?
Yes.
Aren't they smarter than we give them credit for being?
That's so. I'm glad you said that, because the way I kind of framed it was you don't have a choice. You have to, you have to make you have to take a stand. But I think for us, we have always been very focused on equality, pay equality for women, LGBTQ issues, and and that we've carried over into everything. There is no surprise there. So when we come out and we talk about something, when we've written about sexism in the media and we talk about things like that, no one's surprised. They also know that we're primarily all females, and so makes sense as it aligns with our brand. Mm-hmm. And to your point, don't just say something because you think it's what other people want to hear or you feel like you have to say it. It has got to be true to who you are as a company. Otherwise, people are going to sniff it out and will just, then you've got a crisis issue on your hands.
Well, you don't have any benefit at all from that because you've taken a position you didn't need to take.
Yep.
You have gotten 2 minutes worth of off your back media coverage, but in the process, rubbed your audience the wrong way. Does your audience need you to say that? Do they need to hear it? If they do, great. Take the position that makes sense and it's authentic, but don't just do it because everybody else is. That's the thing. I think it's very popular to say we're going to be out on this, that, or the other. But if it doesn't make sense for your brand, if it's not who you are at your core, then it is absolutely something to avoid. If it, like you, Kim Bodie, makes total sense for you and your team to get out on an issue, then go for it and do it as passionately as possible, because then people will be like, yeah, all right, I see why she's doing that. I get it. Mm-hmm. And it's real, and it has an impact on me.
Yeah. Well, no one's surprised. I think the other thing you have to take into account too is your employees. And your what is important to your employees, but I think also you look at your customer base. And I think we've seen examples of employees that had staged walkouts at their companies because they didn't agree with things. And I do think a lot of those, the company didn't make good decisions, or some of it's just internal communications. Are you communicating what you actually are doing? Are you actually hearing? Have you set up a process internally so you hear what your employees feel heard? And I think a lot of times that's the biggest thing, just responding to stuff, just communicating.
Right.
When you don't open an avenue for or channel of communication, then that message is going to define itself. And I think people forget that so many times. You don't have to come out foot down. This is exactly what we are. And sometimes that's good. Nike's taken a lot of those stances. American Eagle did one. I can't even think what it was. I wrote about it probably a couple years ago. And it was an interesting stance for that brand, just because you wouldn't have imagined. It's American Eagle, it's clothing. They're all preppy. They're all hanging out at beaches or, I don't know, private clubs or something. And so you wouldn't think they would take a stance on anything, but they did. And it actually worked out really well for them because it was in some ways very in line with their brand. So, but to your point, if it doesn't make sense for your brand or your company, then just shut up.
Yeah, you have to do the work.
Literally just be quiet.
You have to know ahead of time what that answer is, what is it? Because if you don't know and you start getting pounded by somebody who says you ought to be on this issue or that issue, then you're about to make a really bad decision, a bad announcement, take a bad position. And that was really kind of the point of the conversation back in March, I think, of last year was, do your homework, build a plan, run it like a campaign would, doing opposition research, really understand what your audience cares about beyond a good shirt or a well-fitting pair of underwear, whatever it is you're buying, and then go from there.
And I found what I was looking for because what it was gun control and gay rights. But to your point, they knew what was important to their audience. They had been doing focus groups and customer surveys for decades. They knew their audience ins and out, and they knew what causes were important to them. And so it aligned with their brand, and it was backed up by data, and it was backed up by data and just talking to their customers. So I think that's where some people just, they get lost again.
Well, they get bullied by the media a lot of times too. And I would say that data probably did not include any references to news organizations.
No.
I've been in newsrooms. I've worked in them. I've managed TV newsrooms in 3 markets. And I'll tell you that the last people to be telling anyone how to live their lives or to behave or what decisions they should be making are people in the news. Okay. I'm not not an anti-media person. I was a journalist, but they are not role models. Okay. No. And they do not know most of the time what's best for societies. Their job is to report, in my view, what they see. That has changed a lot too.
Yes, it has.
But a lot of people will make the decision based on one reporter calling about a story and their fear of how that story is going to go out.
Yep.
And that's not part of the calculation. It shouldn't be.
No. You've got CNN up in front of you. I've just got Twitter. So tell me what's going on now.
Well, there was video of some people starting to go home.
Oh my goodness. That's exciting.
Not all of them, though. I mean, there are still some diehards there, and I suppose that'll continue until something more drastic happens. But honestly, some people actually did what Donald Trump told them to do. You could see them walking away dejectedly thinking, it's cold out here.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's getting dark.
I hope I remembered my Confederate flag. I hope I didn't leave it back there.
I don't know how to get out of this big town. Listen, I grew up in a rural area. I love people from the country. And my family didn't really have very much. We were just normal. My mom stayed at home and my dad worked, and her job was harder than his, I think, sometimes. And that was it. So I'm one of those people. But, this is silly. You got to do this at the ballot box. You can't do this anywhere else.
Yeah. I mean, we can't throw out like 100 years of democracy because we're just unhappy with something. I mean, that's not how it works.
I will tell you also, because I have a story for everything, Kim. This would bore you to tears, but I was in Rochester, Minnesota during the 2004 presidential campaign, doing 2 weeks on the ground. I ended up I was working for George W. Bush. I took vacation along with a lot of other people and went up there and elsewhere. We went all over the country. And I was campaigning for almost 2 weeks on the ground in Rochester for him right up to Election Day. And then on Election Day, because they were short of people to judge the polls, I was recruited, even though I'm not an attorney, to stand alongside someone who represented John Kerry at a polling booth table with the judge at that polling place, deciding the intent of votes. Like, well, this mark isn't clear. Is this did this person vote for Kerry, then erase her vote and vote for Bush? Or is that really a mark for Kerry? And so I've been in that position. Yeah. I've also been around those polling places that very same day when people were showing up trying to prove their residency using a piece of junk mail from Ed McMahon. And they were taking
who
it.
hasn't
So listen,
Ed
the
McMahon.
fact is there's fraud in every election, okay? But I don't think that it rises to the occasion of what these guys are doing, and Joe Biden's the president. So that's it. Let's move on. If you don't like him, get rid of him in 4 years.
100%. Well, which I think is what we're trying to do
out.
right
now.
Get
a good candidate. Don't reelect Donald Trump to be your candidate. Pick someone normal.
Breaking news: somebody on my staff just came in here and showed me Pence's Twitter, and his background image is Biden and Harris, like at their
Is that fake news though?
Yeah,
sure
no, I'm telling you.
So?
I'm telling you. I'm gonna look right now.
People say a lot of things about him. But he's a principled guy.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree with his positions. We don't have to agree in America. We can disagree. Okay. That's the key. That's what makes us different from everywhere else. But he's not an overthrow the country person. And he is not someone who's going to say, let's just torch the Constitution and do what we want.
And he didn't give in to the pressure, that was put upon him, the electoral votes today. And so I respect that immensely. I don't have any issue with anybody on the other side of the aisle. I have an issue with the inability for us to have like a conversation, like a discourse. Like it's just, how have we gotten here? And I'm sure that we can go back and we can look. I know that's a whole nother podcast. Yeah. That's a series. Maybe that becomes our new podcast. It's just you and I, and we're just like going at it. One Republican, one Democrat,
Yeah, our logo could be a donkey and an elephant, butts to butts.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Or like one of them's attacking the other. Who's to say? I mean, it could just switch each week.
I was around Congress in 1985 when Democrats and Republicans worked together. Yeah. And did a lot of joint events with Democrats in the state of Arizona, where I worked for a Republican, a moderate though. And those were different times. People were not about personalities. They were about the issues. And in the end, they all agreed that America was awesome and that, how we got there was important. Now, their idea for the trip was maybe a little different, but that's the process. You work that out. You get your best deal you can. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and you move on. But today, it's very personal, and social media hasn't helped that. Because so easy to lie. It's so easy to make things up. People on both sides do it, and it's ridiculous. I'm just tired of the whole thing, actually. That's why I gave up politics for Lent so many years ago. It's interesting, but it's not something I would ever want to do.
Well, and it actually, like, not to keep referring back to that podcast I just listened to, but I think one of the things I'd written down, like, was read and learn, or never stop learning, that he had said. I wrote it someplace, but it was like, continue to dive in, really understand issues, really understand things. And I think what we do now is we look at a headline and we immediately then say, oh, I've taken a stance on this. You haven't read it. You haven't researched it. You haven't looked at other sources. You're just taking one sentence, and that's what you're basing an entire argument or entire outlook on. And it's just, we are smarter than that, but we are lazy. That's what it seems like,
Or we're just choosing to consume the media that fits our taste.
Yeah.
And you can find that on both sides of the political spectrum.
Oh, very much so.
You should really put two TVs next to each other the way Summer and I do here in our office in Virginia, and watch how different a story gets covered on CNN and Fox. And, Fox does what they do, but so does CNN. They're both wrong in different ways. And it's kind of sickening, because when I grew up, in journalism back in the 80s, our job was to see what was happening in front of us and report that as accurately as we could, getting as many perspectives as possible, keeping ourselves out of the story. That was the angle. That was the job. Today, though, journalists are celebrities. And
social media has completely changed it.
Well, yes, but cable TV started it because there's so much airtime that needs to be filled. Yeah. Now we just see endless parades of reporters on the air talking about what they think, not what the people they're covering think, as much as what they think. And they're all writing books, and they're all judged, as you mentioned, by their social media engagement. Their jobs depend on it. So it really has gone down a really bad rabbit hole all the way around. Yeah. And it's not journalism that I know. It's not what I was taught. And I guess that makes me a dinosaur now, because...
No. I think what is important is that if you want to call your dinosaur, then fine. But it's important that, the dinosaurs still have a voice, it's important for this, especially these, the millennials and the Gen Z and Gen X, to know that this is not how it always was. I remember what it was now in the podcast. It was prioritize learning and relationships. That stuck with me. And I think that's so true. I think what we're losing right now is a deep dive into understanding things. So really educating ourselves, and we're not looking at relationships. We're looking at it's like we can't have we can't have conversations that are difficult. It's like we weren't taught to do that. It's like we don't know how to do that anymore. We just immediately we revert to anger, and and part of that is because we're not educating ourselves, and part of it is because we're not trying to understand the other side, which I think goes back to the relationship aspect, if you ask me. So
yeah, I think that's right. Get to know somebody. Don't judge them by some headline. Because you can agree to disagree. And if you like somebody and they like you, then the disagreements aren't such a big deal. I'm like, yeah, Kim, I know that you're for that and I'm not for that, but who cares?
Yeah. And Kim, maybe you just calm down a little bit. You're a little intense.
We're fine. So, when Adrian told me, I'm sorry about, I'm like, it's fine. I don't care.
The amount of times where Adrian had to apologize for me.
I was like, don't worry about it. It's all fine. You don't even need to worry about it. She doesn't need to say. She goes, I think she might say something. I'm like, she doesn't need to.
Just be prepared.
I'm
Just
like,
be prepared.
Well, I can't wait to hear what that is. No.
Oh my God. I am a fun date to a dinner party. Let me tell you what.
It was absolutely fun. And, there's nothing wrong with spending time with people who aren't, 100% like you. Actually, I think it's better.
Oh, well, can you imagine how boring would it be if we're surrounded by, I do not want to be friends with another person like me. Please,
we're already doing that because of the pandemic. We have to be friends with ourselves all day long.
Yeah.
How much
I'm staring
fun
at
has
my
that been,
Zoom
people?
all the time. I'm like, oh God, yeah.
There ought to be a requirement, go find someone who completely disagrees with you on everything and make them your friend.
And then get on a Zoom because that makes everything awkward anyway. And then have a conversation with them. Yeah. Just see what happens.
It's great to have different people.
I feel like we just invented a new show. Like we just put people in a room, like on opposite sides of issues. And then they have to talk to each other.
Call it Relationship Island.
Yeah, somebody's gonna steal this from us.
They probably
should. Maybe we should. Yeah, stolen, I know. Well, that's true. I can imagine.
You know what my best one was that really pissed me off when I realized someone finally did it? Was a brownie pan that kicks out every brownie with edges. That was my idea. I love the edge of a brownie because it's crispy.
As you've seen on TV.
Well, somebody finally did it. It's a long, skinny pan, and you pour it and you cut it down the middle and then slice it sideways, and every brownie has at least one edge. And I thought, damn it.
What's with the edge? I never really got that.
Oh, it's the best part.
Because it's crispy and then like softer. I guess I can get behind.
I like the. It should have been mine, but
do you have that pan?
No.
Or were you like,
I protest. I'm not buying.
Yeah. That's fair.
Damn the edges.
Yeah, damn the edges.
That's a little known fact about Robert Johnson, by the way.
That you did invent that. You did nothing with it.
Yes,
so there's
many years ago. Yeah, long before it showed up at
Michael's. Of course, it was at Michael's.
That's where they sell all cake stuff, right?
Obviously,
the cake baking stuff.
Well, I could talk to you literally for hours, but I've got to go watch the shit show that's happening in Washington right now in D.C. But I do want
for you. Yeah,
I think you did. I think you did. I do want you to before we part. I would love to know what you're reading. And what you recommend for PR practitioners or those who are just kind of coming in, where they should be going, what they should be reading, like one piece of advice for them, and then what you're reading right now.
Well, reading's a little difficult for me because of a very mild case of ADD. So although I have a ton of books and love them, getting through one is a challenge. I'm almost done with a biography about Thomas Paine.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Who was quite an interesting guy, actually. He was involved both in the American Revolution and the French Revolution, because after things got settled here, he was bored, so he went over to Paris and helped.
Why not?
Yeah.
He was like, let's do another revolution.
Yeah, so he was in the area when I think Marie Antoinette had her head chopped off too. So that's kind of where I am right now in the book.
Okay.
The guy was, he died destitute, shunned by everybody, but had an amazing and unsung role in talking about the core principles that the country is founded on today. Freedom, liberty, the right to own property, all kinds of things. Anyway, that bio came out a year or two ago, and I started it about 8 months ago, so you can see how well I do there. Usually I can't stay up more than 5 minutes once I hit the bed. So,
well, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah. Okay, so before I tell you what I'm reading, I want to know what your one piece, like a piece of advice you'd give every new PR practitioner.
A piece of advice for every new person. Learn as much as you can. It kind of goes along with what you were saying earlier, and that really doesn't matter. How you do it, but learning and reading and getting out of your lane. So if you can combine those, the more you know about a lot of things, the better off you'll be, because in this business, you never know what you'll be asked to work on, and a little bit of knowledge goes a long way. Yeah.
Agree. Because I have to share now too, because that's what I do.
Yeah, I want to hear this.
I actually am reading No Ordinary Year. It's Doris Kearns Goodwin, who I really love. I read Team of Rivals by her, which it's a hard book. You would never get through it. Like ADD wise, like probably you would, not. Yeah. It's like, I mean, but I learned a lot about like looking at like how Lincoln essentially like ran his campaign, and then how he basically took those that ran against him and integrated them into his cabinet, which was brilliant. But anyway, so like I'm now reading No Ordinary Year, and I read a lot on World War II and World War I and, our different military conflicts. But what I like about this, it talks about how we essentially, because we were just coming out of the Depression, And it talks about how we essentially were able to mobilize the home front to be able to, even start, building these, our ships and our artillery and planes and stuff like that. And I find that stuff fascinating.
Cool. That is cool. It would have been a better answer if you had asked me what I've been watching.
Oh, what have you been watching?
Well, we binged Downton Abbey. We had never seen that, and we were really bummed when we ran out of episodes. And then, so we decided, well, we haven't had enough British, so we started The Crown.
Oh.
Yeah. And
You're
I think
get
probably
into that.
In 5 years, we're going to move to London when our kid starts college. So
that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, we have friends that are in the UK. So then Northern England that we go and visit quite often. Like we at least go once a year. And it's just. Mm-hmm.
So there you go. That's my answer. It's a little longer.
I love it. Well, that's fine because this was a little longer podcast than we usually do, but I like you, so it's fine. And I can do what I want because it's my podcast.
You can. You're the boss. You're the boss lady.
I mean, exactly. So you are the best. Thank you so much for joining us. I just think you are amazing. So thank you for sharing your PR knowledge, and thank you for always thinking about like the students and like, those that are coming into the industry, because it is so hard when you're starting out. And I think there's so many of those that are seniors that are just like, cannot be bothered by it. I don't have time to teach. I don't have time to deal with this. And I think like we're looking at like our future. And so just take the time.
Good advice. And Kim, thanks for having me on. This was fun. And you are on my short list of faves too. So.
Oh, well, thank you.
Can you handle that?
I'm going to work my way all the way up.
Does it matter? So, I mean, I don't know. I have a good list of faves. You're on it. Adrian,
I think so. I really respect you. So I think that you probably like, in your opinion. So I'm going to guess that it's a pretty good list.
Oh, yeah. Not that you need my endorsement, but you've absolutely made the cut.
Thank you.
Pick butt, take names.
Do you hear that, Adrian? Adrian, are you listening?